Ladies, gentlemen, dear colleagues, good afternoon from Vienna. My name is Artyom Lazarev. I'm a program officer at UNODC's CBRN Terrorism Prevention Program of the Terrorism Prevention Branch. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the third event of our webinar series on the International Convention for the Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism, or ICSANT. This series is conducted by the CBRN Terrorism Prevention Program and funded by the European Union. Today's event will be focusing on nuclear forensics and ICSANT. I would like to mention that the webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be made available on our website, unodc.org/ICSANT. So I'm delighted to have with us today an internationally recognized expert in the area of nuclear forensics, Dr. Andrei Apostol, who is a judicial expert in the field of nuclear security. He initiated the establishment of the first Romanian nuclear forensics laboratory and its approval at the highest national level. Dr. Apostol was elected as a co-chair of the Nuclear Forensics Working Group of the Global Initiative to Combat Nuclear Terrorism, ICSANT, in 2021. He has been working in the field of nuclear security and non-proliferation for the last 15 years, being involved in supporting numerous criminal investigations of interdicted nuclear and other radioactive material. Currently, Dr. Apostol is the Director of Nuclear Fuel Cycle and Non-Proliferation at Raw Power Nuclear, supporting the implementation of the first small modular reactor project in Romania. Before we start, I would like to note that if you have any questions to the speaker, please send them to the following address, UNODC-ICSANT, UNODC-ICSANT@un.org. Just you will see it on your screen. And we will be happy to read them to Dr. Apostol. Let me start with a short description of ICSANT. This convention was adopted in 2005 and entered into force in 2007. The number of parties to it are currently 124. I should add that we at the UNODC, should add that the ICSANT provides a framework for collaboration among states in addressing nuclear terrorism and other criminal acts involving nuclear and other radioactive material. Specifically, ICSANT requires parties to criminalize certain conduct, such as, for example, the unlawful and intentional use of radioactive sources or devices to cause death, serious bodily injury, or substantial damage to property or to the environment. Parties to ICSANT are also required to establish jurisdiction over these offenses and either prosecute or extradite alleged offenders. The third major area of ICSANT is international cooperation, in particular in detecting, preventing, suppressing, and investigating the offenses set forth in ICSANT. This cooperation can take many forms, starting from extradition, preventive measures, mutual legal assistance, information exchange, and so-called post-crisis situations, including cooperation on nuclear forensics. At this point, I would like to give the floor to our distinguished speaker, Dr. Apostol. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Artyom. Thank you for your kind introduction. Just to check up if you see the presentation, do you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. That's a big privilege for me to be part of this event. I would like to thank UNODC for inviting me here and congratulate UNODC for the work you do. I know you don't have a very large team, Artyom, but the impact that you make with the promotion of ICSANT and DUS, raising awareness about the importance of criminalization of nuclear security events is unparalleled. And I can see already a lot of impact on the international level among countries you work with when it comes to criminalizing nuclear security events. So this presentation is to talk about nuclear forensics, the way some of the good practices countries should approach nuclear forensics when they have related needs to develop such a domain of expertise, especially in the context of ICSANT. I will try to make it fun. It's a little bit challenging, I have to admit, virtually, but I did prepare a couple of slides that are unusual for my presentations. I hope you like them. So one thing that is important to understand is that nuclear forensics is a very attractive discipline. I even tend to believe that it's a very good trick to kind of attract young generation to study science. You tell them, well, you can work in the field of nuclear forensics. That's kind of a Sherlock Holmes activity. But for that, you have to go to the university and you have to study physics and chemistry and math and geology and all this, even psychology sometimes, data analysis. So all these fields that are not so popular nowadays. So that's one of the tricks I use as well with my students. To make them come to our faculty as well. So one important parameter here that everybody should keep in mind is that even if this specific field of forensics, nuclear forensics, refers to nuclear physics realm, from a legal point of view, that there's no difference between nuclear forensics and traditional forensics, procedurally speaking, and it has to be implemented in accordance with the national legal framework, specifically the criminal code, the criminal procedural code, or any other nuclear law that the country has adopted. As you know, countries have different legislation. They see their legislation differently as well. So it depends from the state to state. But certainly the forensics work, especially when it comes to nuclear forensics, has to be done in accordance with the procedures described in the legal framework. Sometimes when countries just start developing this discipline, they would be associating nuclear security events with organizations like regulatory body, some kind of nuclear agency, which is working in a country, or emergency services, or intelligence agencies, or even environmental protection agency. In my experience, that was very important to get all of these stakeholders on board when it comes to nuclear security events, especially where there is a reasonable probability that the crime is committed. However, one should not primarily focus on those organizations. One should primarily focus on judiciary, whether it's a judicial police, law enforcement organization, or the judicial authorities such as prosecutors or even judges, because those are the ones who own the case, the criminal case, where nuclear forensics is required, for example. So prosecutors, judges in France, they can be an investigative judge. In civil law countries, that's mostly the prosecutor either investigating himself or herself or supervising the investigation, which is delegated to the judicial police. There is this very nice document of the International Atomic Energy Agency, nuclear security recommendations on nuclear or other radioactive material found out of regulatory control. And it recommends that member states develop comprehensive nuclear forensic capabilities according to their nuclear security needs. However, even when you develop such capabilities, let's say you buy a bunch of equipment and you develop expertise, you deliver training, it seemed a little bit difficult to implement a new science as a tool like those offered as a tool on your national within your national on the level of your country, because there are also particularities of various legal systems have to be considered, and specifically the system in this state that is deciding to implement nuclear forensics. And that's what we did as well. We have developed it, we have developed the lab, but it didn't work until we started having a dialogue with the prosecutors and judges and other authorities to make sure that everybody is aware of such discipline and of the importance of criminalization. In fact, it was very interesting to find out that we have done a comprehensive implementation of the ICSANT provisions. Even in the criminal code, we do have a dedicated article to any unauthorized action with nuclear or other radioactive material, which is considered a criminal offense. And looking to different systems, there's different legal systems in the world. Mostly it is a civil law system, which is basically based on the French law. There is a lot of mixed laws between civil law, common law, and other types of law. There is common law also in countries like Canada, US, Australia, UK, New Zealand, Ireland. And I will going to talk a little bit about the differences between these legal systems and how the investigation is approached, generically speaking, because you will understand that the legal system and the way the authorities see the legal system is specific to a certain state, and it's different from state to state. So let's imagine we have a nuclear security event. Somebody steals a radioactive source. And then we will have civil law and common law. As I said, in civil law, there's going to be a prosecutor, primarily responsible for conducting an investigation. So his main or her main task will not necessarily be to prosecute, so to find the person guilty. However, his main task will be to find the truth, assess facts and circumstances of what happened, who did it, find the criminals, and prove their intent. So to do so, he has to or she has to use the legal basis to open a criminal case. So there is a legislation covering his actions. While in common law, there is no most of the time there's no need for opening criminal case. The law enforcement will just start the investigation, and then whenever they find that there is guilt, there's enough evidence that the crime was committed, they will build a file and then submit it to the prosecutor, to the prosecutor's office, so it can be presented in the court of law. Again, this is not two very specific differences, as every country is different. Most of the countries, in fact, mix the best approaches from the both legal systems, but generically, this is the main difference that has to be understood. Whenever we attend these international events, we talk about the investigators as law enforcement. Well, for most of the world, as you can see in this slide, it is in fact not the law enforcement. It is the judiciary who primarily conducts the investigation, and this cannot be characterized as law enforcement, like prosecutors or judges. Okay, so they will look for evidence. If there's no evidence, the civil law will close the case without convicting anybody. The prosecutor can just decide based on the investigation findings that there's no criminality involved, so the case will be closed. In common law, the case will not be even opened, so there's nothing to be submitted to the prosecutor so he or she can present it in court. Now, if there is evidence, then we continue with the investigation and subsequent submission of the files to the court. Now, in the court of law, there is quite a difference as well. Again, generically speaking, in civil law, there is, in common law, there is oftentimes juries present, and jury's role is decide upon the guilt, while the role of the judge is to decide upon the penalty, or how many years this person gets in jail. And then in civil law, the judge can decide on both, on the guilt and as well as on the penalties. Again, keeping in mind that every country is different, but generically speaking, this is how what we should understand as a difference between the two legal systems. Okay. So now, when it comes to nuclear forensics and forensics in general, there's certain requirements in the procedural code or national legislation, nuclear law, depends on the country, which will tell you which experts should you work with within criminal investigation. And I will give you one of the examples. So the prosecutor, for example, in civil law countries, will look in the list which is approved by a court or authorized by an entity. For example, a Minister of Justice, where there is a list of experts. Every single of those experts had to go to the procedure in which he or she have proved their competence. The fact that they they are experts in their field of expertise, which is relevant for the investigation, like digital forensics or fingerprints or nuclear forensics, and then they will be authorized by the entity like a Ministry of Justice, so that then the prosecutor's life or the judge's life or the law enforcement becomes easier, as they just simply select the relevant expert from this list. But you all know that nuclear forensics is a new discipline. There's not many authorized judicial experts, so they can be direct selection of the experts. So the criminal law, criminal procedural code in many countries allows the investigators to go to certain institutions and select their experts or select the institutions they want to work with. They will do the analysis of their CV, of their experience. They will talk to them and decide who is going to be at the institution or the expert from the specific institution who is going to generate the analysis report. In the end of the day, there's a report that goes in the court that will describe the facts and circumstances related to the specific material. In our case, that can be nuclear material or any other radioactive material. It can be pieces of exhibits that are contaminated with radionuclides. So kind of a traditional forensic evidence which is contaminated and therefore becomes nuclear forensic evidence. And then experts can be also called in the court of law to testify. And they might be cross-examined, which is, I can tell you, it's not an easy task to do. In this context, perhaps, Artyom, we can think about some kind of training for experts. As I saw, this is a really, really hard time that experts have talking to the lawyers and prosecutors and judges. Sometimes, even in the simulation, it is not easy. So. And that's not an expert's job to work in the court compared to those of the prosecutors or lawyers. So we have to be very careful with experts. We don't have too many of them. Okay, so I'll give you just a short example. I'll talk about Romania and basically our experience in how did we approach the implementation of nuclear forensics, especially in the context of national legislation. We were, I believe, at some point given as a country, as an example country who had implemented the provisions of ICSANT and even took it to kind of a next level. So we went beyond these provisions. So we do criminalize every unauthorized action with nuclear material. And there are many laws and articles in criminal code that give us the legal basis for that. With or without intent, we will open a criminal case so that we can identify the existence of the potential intent. So the legislation was present. And then we thought, well, how should we approach nuclear forensics? Where should we develop it? The first thing that came in mind is to go to the police. And this is what I did, in fact. I went to the police office and I said, well, guys, you do have this amazing forensics institute. How about we build nuclear? So as soon as I said the word nuclear, I was kicked out. So I said, okay, that's not going to work in this country. And then the next logical step was to go to a nuclear physics institute and try to develop it there. Given the fact that these scientists that will take this responsibility, they have to also be taught legal proceedings. So it is, for us, at least, it was a little bit easier to teach scientists to follow legal proceedings than to teach police or lawyers to follow, to understand nuclear physics. So that's the institute in Magurele. This is largest nuclear research development institute in Romania. It's located in this round forest. The reason for the forest to be round because initially there was a reactor there, and so that the contamination is not spread in case of accident. That there was an artificially planted forest. Anyway, so this institute had already a lot of equipment available, many departments such as irradiation laboratory, the particle accelerators, multiple, radioactive waste management, radiopharmaceuticals department, and so on. So, IAEA, as I said at the beginning, recommends that you first look at your needs. do you need this discipline? Do you need to buy this equipment? Do you need this assistant? What is the threat assessment? What is the risk assessment within your state, within your country? What are your detection capabilities? So we said, okay, why should we do that? We looked at the map. There was back in 2015 or 16, we had no virtually criminal cases opened within the state. That was something verified by the head prosecutor from the Directorate of Investigations of Organized Crime and Terrorism, Elena Dinu, who was the guru of criminalization of process of criminalization of the nuclear security events within the country. But we said, well, this is weird because the way material found outside regulatory control at our borders, like in Moldova, there was this famous case in Bulgaria. I didn't put it on map, but Ukraine had quite a lot of cases back then. Hungary had cases as well, and we didn't. Even though back then there were about 720 incidents reported to the ITGB, which were specific to the Black Sea region, and that is about a third of all the cases reported to the ITGB in general. So that's quite a lot, and it was very surprising. So we thought maybe we are not lucky. It's just that we don't have perhaps a process that will allow us to criminalize those events and investigate. And when you investigate, you find more events because you find the truth, you find what happened, who did it. So even in the end of the day, you can prevent these events. And I'll just ask you to remember this map of Romania, how clean it is at this point. No events. There were some orphan sources events, but those were not criminalized because it was decided that it is an orphan source and there is no criminality involved. So how did we approach that to kind of see if we can solve it, if maybe we miss something? The phrase I like to say at this specific slide is, you don't know what you don't know. In our context, before you criminalize and you investigate. And you cannot investigate if you don't criminalize because you simply don't have a legal basis for that. So how did we approach that? We build a better detection and prevention capabilities. We did apply those to things like major public events, monitoring of environment and so on and so forth. But we did strengthen our detection capabilities. We thought that maybe our detection capability on the national level doesn't work. We did perform some maintenance of the existing detection capability that resulted in a more efficient work that those detectors were doing. We built radiological crime scene management capabilities. And when I say capabilities, I don't necessarily mean equipment. Equipment was largely available. We did build an expertise. So we did train people. We did exercises, a lot of exercises. We worked closely with the IAEA, with ODC, with other international organizations, European Commission, especially GRC Castro and the training center at EUSECTRA. Anyway, in the end of the day, we have quite advanced RCSM capabilities on the national level, combined with those detection capabilities that I previously mentioned. And then nuclear forensics. Well, we did have a lot of equipment that was already available. Mass spectrometers, IR beam analysis, multiple gamma spectrometric systems, which was pretty good. However, we thought, well, we have to build a dedicated lab due to the fact that we do live in this vulnerable region, and certainly there was some kind of vulnerability or a gap that was identified purely statistically from this map that I showed you before. So then what we did is basically we had a call for proposals. The European Union have granted us an amount of money to procure equipment and establish a lab. So we did buy all this additional equipment, such as multiple gamma spec systems, scanning electron microscope, a very dedicated ICP-MS. We did invest a lot in traditional forensics. So this glove box that you see here in the middle is basically a fingerprint developing setup where we can develop fingerprints on the items of evidence which are contaminated with radionuclides. It wasn't our idea. It was something I have seen in GRC Castro and was really impressed. So we built kind of a similar device and proved proof that it worked. And we did also buy some more equipment. All in the meantime, we were investing quite significantly in human capacity. Providing training, sending people to fellowships, transnational assignments in other labs which are more advanced than ours, so they can build the expertise. And I can say you can have the best equipment in the world. If you don't have a dedicated people, this equipment will not work, and even eventually you can throw it away because spider webs are going to appear on it. So investing in people was really crucial in all this process. And another important conclusion here is that when approaching forensics, forensics is not really only about science. It's about the approach itself. So the goal of forensics is to help the investigator find the truth about the crime. So it's like an art. You basically improvise quite a lot to figure out, what's happened, who did it, and so on and so forth. Another goal of forensics is to find out the point of loss of last authorized control. Even if it's not asked by the prosecutor, it can be asked you by your state authorities, so that you can find out whether this material is yours or it's coming from elsewhere, from another country. If it's yours, then you probably have vulnerability at some facility where it was stolen from, and you have to fix it, so no material is escaping outside regulatory control. If it's coming from another country, then probably you have a detection architecture issue, whether it's a detection by equipment or the detection by information. Probably something is missing, so that can be also addressed. So as I said, there were no criminal cases opened before that. The lab was established in 2015 formally. In fact, in 2015, we were able to work closely within the Global Initiative to Combat Nuclear Terrorism with our Minister of Foreign Affairs, who've conducted a meeting with prosecutors and a couple of exercises. One of them was very efficient, called Olympus Reloaded, supported by the international organizations, US State Department. And it resulted in a MOU in which this lab was, the laboratory was mentioned, and it was approved on the national level, on the highest national level. In fact, the president of a country himself approved the existence of this lab and the support for this lab. And then, who could believe that this will happen? The first investigated criminal case occurred in 2018, when about 2 kilograms of depleted uranium were seized outside of regulatory control. Since then, more than 16 criminal cases were opened, which involved different kinds of nuclear and other radioactive material. And even, I have a colleague and a friend in Sweden whose name is Vitaly and Fedchenko, and he would always make these jokes with me. He will say, what happened in Romania? You had 0 criminal cases in 30 years, and then suddenly you have 16 cases in a couple of years. Is it some kind of criminal investigation, criminal organization that decided to do illicit activities with nuclear materials in your country? Of course not. The answer is that we became much better. We became much better not only by building the capability, but mostly by raising awareness about the existence of the legal basis for criminalizing those events. Awareness about the fact that those events exist, they occur, they have to be criminalized, and building awareness about the existence of a technical capability that can support the investigation. I have to also mention the prosecutor, Elena Dinu, has been, she initiated this whole thing, and she's now an international level expert in this. It was really good to see how something that started as an idea in 2015 evolved as an instrument of the state security interest. This is just a couple of pictures from those events. On the left, you can see Olympus Reloaded. It was a very successful event with a huge impact. We then even co-hosted the International Technical Working Group meeting number 24, which I have to say, informally, this is when you co-host this meeting, you can say that you are on the right track. You kind of achieved a good nuclear forensic capability. So we did co-host it. I don't remember exactly the year. I believe it was 2019. This was another successful event. And then later, in close cooperation with our partners in the US, our national authorities, regional partners as well, we have conducted quite a lot of exercises in which we have offered training to the region. So we had in this middle picture, you can see there was participants from Georgia and Moldova coming through the IAEA residential assignment, our nuclear forensics program, to our lab, spending 3 hours with us, 3 months with us working on nuclear forensics and building their expertise. This was kind of a training on the job. So we do share what we have built within last years. And of course, there's no way you can do it alone. There was a lot of support from many national authorities, such as the regulatory body, the public prosecutors of the public ministry, the prosecutors' offices, the DCOD, which is the place where it all started, the judicial police, such as the Directorate for Arms, Explosives, and Dangerous Substances, the Romanian Gendarmerie, the Ministry of Defense. All of those worked together to achieve this result, and it was very successful. All of those were our clients as well, the clients of the Nuclear Forensics Lab. We also built capabilities. We also built cooperation with the European Commission. We signed a memorandum of understanding with them, with practical arrangements with the International Atomic Energy Agency dedicated to nuclear forensics. We did build formalized our relationships with Hungary and Moldova, the 2 neighboring countries. We did even provide technical support when it comes to maintenance of equipment to Hungary and to Moldova as well, by looking into some malfunction of their high purity germanium gamma detectors. So I ask you to remember the map, the clean map that I showed you at the beginning. After all this work, after these events, after these exercises, cooperation agreements, continuous criminalization and support of the investigation, application of legal provisions, we ended up having a map like that. And Artyom, I can tell you that just for the future, I can deliver a 1-hour presentation on every single picture that you can, a smaller picture that you can see on the map. So all of these were criminal cases that were recorded, and some of them were even involving organized crime, like a playing cards case, which I presented many times, where a group of certain expat community in the country were using iodine-125 radioactive isotope to cheat in a casino game, and it was organized crime in which this group, organized criminal group, were shipping the radioactive material to the country. So it was illicit trafficking, and then using it to win money in gambling games. So there was also unauthorized possession and unauthorized use. Okay. So we had a big discussion some time ago in the ICWG, where the nuclear forensics, where the nuclear security is a full-time job. There were pros and cons, and then we discussed whether nuclear forensics is a full-time job. Well, I can say for us it wasn't a full-time job, but then apparently it was. Just we didn't know. So now it's a full-time job. You know, given the fact that one case requires a forensic analysis of about 2 months, and then given a country in the Black Sea region can have at least can detect up to 6 or 7 or more cases per year, which can be criminalized. And of course, what you detect is not what you have. You have much more than what you detect. It's really the question how good you are at detecting. But for us, it became a full-time job. So, and we are happy with that, because every single criminal case, and every single case like that, which is criminalized and investigated, leads to prevention. of future cases like that, either by making your nuclear security infrastructure better, either by putting people in jail, those who are criminals, those whose intent is proven. And my former boss, who is here in the middle in the picture, he says every time he reviews my presentations, he would say, "Why didn't you put a uranium gamma spectra?" So this is a uranium gamma spectra. Anyway, in 2023, Romania has joined the Nuclear Security Support Centers network of the IAEA, in which we have identified a couple of priorities, such as regional international coordination and cooperation in nuclear security, exchange of good practices, information exchange, training, and outreach. I have to also mention that in many cases, we have worked with other countries. Like one of the very successful examples was Germany, the Federal Radiation Protection Office in Berlin, the Ministry of Environment, which was really successful as we had similar cases in which we collaborated quite fruitfully. And luckily, we did have a legal basis for that, such as ICSANT, but also our investigators were quite open to cooperate, both formally and informally. So in conclusion, that is, again, something that we have identified together with Elena from our almost a decade of experience in working towards making our nuclear security response part more efficient. For example, the implementation of nuclear forensics as a component of forensic science on the national level should be done in strict accordance with the criminal code. Otherwise, it won't work. The evidence won't be admissible in the court. Your reports will not be admissible in the court as well. Nothing will be helpful if you don't do it in strict accordance with legal provisions that you have implemented in your country. Another conclusion is that because of the specificity of the civil law system, we recommend that every seizure of morgue, even if it looks like an orphan source, clearly open a criminal case, and it has to be done that way, as it represents, especially in the countries who have implemented the ICSANT provisions in their national legislation. These more cases, they represent an illicit activity sanctionable by the criminal law. And that has to be followed by opening a criminal investigation and prosecution, given the principles of legality, for example, which is not the case for common law or for some specific common law jurisdictions, where the prosecution can be dropped based on the opportunity of assessment. So, as I told you, whether law enforcement will decide whether there's no need to open a criminal case after conducting certain investigation, and the criminal case will never be opened. And now a little bit about the information exchange, nuclear forensic information exchange, and other cooperation responsibilities, such as that one that we had with Germany, should be established within channels primarily responsible for criminal investigations, such as judicial authorities in civil law countries, police in common law countries or law enforcement, or other state bodies with investigative responsibilities. And this is very important, as we oftentimes see that the point of contacts are within different information exchange mechanisms are those who are dealing with nuclear in a state, let's say. Those organizations might not necessarily have the possession or the right to exchange criminal investigative information. And therefore, our recommendation was that whoever establishes a database, for example, there's one at the IAEA, there's one in Interpol, has to make sure that there is an involvement through the point of contact or direct involvement of those who deal with these cases and criminalize those cases and investigate those cases, such as law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, any judicial authorities, or any other authority identified in the state. Sometimes it can be a Minister of Defense, who have part of their mandate to conduct criminal investigation and rights to share such information. And yeah, this was all from my side. This is a picture of this playing card that I told you. Sometimes people don't need a very advanced forensics equipment. They just need a flashlight and then they can see that something is wrong with the card, which also presents contamination. It's not accidental, as we have initially thought when we have detected those contaminated cards. There was something implanted there for a reason. So open criminal cases, investigate, identify the truth, prosecute those who are involved when intent is proven, and when building a capability, buy equipment if you need it, but mostly invest in your people. So that's all from me. Artyom, back to you. Thank you.
Many thanks, Andrei, for your very insightful presentation. I don't know how about you, dear participants, but it was a little bit scary and preoccupying to see the sheer increase of cases that Andrei referred to on his second map. But on the other hand, it's always good to know the unknown rather to not to know it. I would like to remind you, dear participants, that there is an opportunity to ask your questions to Dr. Apostol. You just send us a quick email to the following address that you will see on your screens. So, dc-xant@un.org. And I would also like to mention, basically follow up as a follow-up to your last bullet point on the need and very crucial role that international cooperation and information exchange plays in investigating and prosecuting cases involving nuclear and other radioactive material, and particularly the role of points of contacts. In this regard, I would like to mention that ICSANT, in its Article 7, Paragraph 4, contains an obligation on all state parties to designate a liaison point or competent authority that would be in charge of exchanging information under ICSANT, meaning that they will channel the information that was gathered in the country and send it to the similar point of contact, liaison point, or competent authority in another country. That really avoids the situation when there is a chaos and there is lack of understanding who is responsible of sending this information and receiving information from abroad on the cases that are under ICSANT. And lastly, I would just like to mention that since over a year ago, UNODC has been tasked by the Office of Legal Affairs of the United Nations in New York to receive such information about countries, liaison point, and competent authorities, and to disseminate this information among other states parties and make this information basically known to the outer world, including international organizations. You may find this information whether or not, for example, your country designated such liaison point or competent authority by checking our website, which is unodc.org/ICSANT, or which has an alternative non-official address as icsant.com. There you will see a section on the competent authorities right on the front page. So let me check if we have any questions so far. So not yet. Well, I'll take this occasion and ask you the following question, Andrei. Supposing a country does not have capacity to conduct nuclear forensics analysis. So the question is, what options would such country have to solve this problem? I mean, this question relates to both a short-term situation, when a crime involving a radioactive material has been committed, quite recently or now, and a long-term situation, when a country needs to build a national nuclear forensics capacity. Maybe when you talk about the latter part of the question, you can piggyback on what you said previously and maybe developed it. Thank you.
That's a good question. I think that is something that many countries in the world are thinking about. How do you start? How do you build capacity? Especially the developing countries. I think that there is, first of all, you have to look whether you need such capacity and what level of capacity do you need. One thing is clear: nuclear security have no borders. So we all are here alone and not alone, and we all have to support each other. So imagine, Artyom, if a case is prevented somewhere, far away in Asia, for example, it will never have a chance to arrive to my country or your country. And that's very important. And this help is available. There is IAEA member state support program in nuclear forensics in terms of training and so on and so forward. There is the European Union level. There is GRC culture. There is a lot of work. There's a lot of support available at something we call donor countries, like Norway, for example. US, UK, and so on, that can work bilaterally with states to help them develop this capability, depending on their needs. So there's a lot of support there. The only thing is that you have to do the self-assessment. You have to understand what are your needs, exactly what are your needs, and to justify these needs. So if you do have a need which is justified, I can guarantee 99.9%, it's never 100, that you will get help either from international organization, either from like-minded, partner countries. Now, I'm kind of answering, starting from the back, from the end of your question, getting back to the beginning. When you have a criminal case opened, there is a couple of ways you can cooperate. So I never seen in my experience direct expert-to-expert cooperation on the formal way. Within a criminal case, because there is certain information that one should be allowed to share when it comes to ongoing criminal case. But it can be done. It can be done through those who own the right to share such information, such as those who open the criminal case, the owners of the case, like prosecutors. And then it can be done like we did it with Germany. Prosecutors, together with their experts, talked to prosecutors together with their experts from another country, and it was quite successful. But in a hypothetical scenario, when you want to do that, you have to have some basis for this. And there are three main approaches that we have identified with Elena when we try to reach out to other countries. One is when you are both parties to the same international legal mechanisms, such as ICSANT. You can just call, say, hey, we are both committed to do that, to criminalize, to prevent nuclear security events or nuclear terrorism events. Let's cooperate because we are both parties to this convention. Another one, there can be multilateral or bilateral agreement between countries. That is something very powerful as well. And the question is whether you don't have anything in place. Some would say, well, you cannot cooperate. What we have found out that you actually can if this other country wants to. But here comes the principle of reciprocity. So whenever this other country needs help from you, you basically have to respond positively if they did respond positively as well when it comes to joint investigations. But also beyond ICSANT, there is multiple conventions that, like Joint Investigation Convention, for example, that will also kind of allow you to work together. For us, it was a great success, this cooperation with Germany. I have to emphasize it again. And we did achieve results, raising awareness, by the way, that the crime, this criminal organization is still ongoing, and it has to be prevented by the international community working in nuclear security. International organizations such Interpol, for example, or the countries coming together to address it. So I believe that the last case was really recent with the cards, by the way, a couple of weeks ago or so. Yeah, thank you. I hope this answers your question, Dr.
Thank you, Andrei. Indeed, and we have meanwhile received one question from our participants. So, take into account the rapid development of nuclear energy in Romania and the need of nuclear fuel. Is the Nuclear Forensics Bureau ready to prevent the possible increase in criminal cases?
Yeah, I think we yeah, thank you for, I don't know who asked this question, but it's a very good question. We do indeed advance quite a lot in nuclear energy nowadays, and it's one of our priorities given the need for energy security nowadays, especially when it comes to various fuel types of nuclear fuel. And I do believe that the answer to this question is it depends. I tend to believe it's more yes than no. One of the focuses when I was working in building nuclear forensic capability was towards its sustainability. So it does not depend on a single person. It does not depend on a single organization. Therefore, I'm very proud of not only the lab itself with the equipment, and the methodology behind it, but also of the group of people that we have established. And I now took a teaching role at the university as well. And there are some young people coming and saying, well, we want to follow your course in nuclear security because we want to work in the field of nuclear forensics. And they don't even know that I was part of this team, building nuclear forensic capabilities. And it is like, we have to say, I tend to say honey on my heart when I see that something that I did before attracts people, young generation to come and follow and study science for that. So the answer is yes, the capability in terms of human and technical capability is well established, and especially I have to say it is sustainable, and it is ready to respond to requests from judicial authorities. Nowadays, even it attracts new talents, new generation. I think we have about we just hired two new persons to work in this field. Thank you for the question. Excellent.
Thank you, Andrei. We have yet another question, which is less of a technical nature, maybe more of a political. But let me know if you would like to take into account your professional and technical background. So, is nuclear security, and I would also interpret nuclear forensics, going to be an issue in a multipolar world where information sharing and trade and so on is getting impacted? I understand that it relates to the international cooperation in nuclear security and nuclear forensics in the era of difficult political situation between countries. Thank you.
Yeah, so for political questions, Artyom, I have superpower. I imagine that I'm in a court of law, and I would say it is outside my area of expertise. However, I will comment on that. I think the world is changing, of course, and but as I said, nuclear security, where nuclear forensics is a tool, it's a discipline with no borders, and we are here all together again in a fight against criminality, against those people who want to cause harm. And here it comes a time where I believe the most important role is played by the trust that we have to build among national stakeholders cross-border, and this can be done through connecting people who are competent, who can work together through exercises, through even joint investigations. And as soon as you build this trust, you can be efficient in responding to criminal events together. There's somebody called Murphy who had a law who said if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. The question is really, will we, as law enforcement community or scientific community, good guys, be more prepared than them, the criminals? So in any world, I do believe that good should win the bad, and then you do it mostly by building trust between each other. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Andrei. And we are coming to an end of our webinar. We don't have any more questions. So I would like to express our gratitude on behalf of the UNOWC to you, Andrei, for your excellent presentation, and to all our audience for your time. I would also like to reiterate that if you have possibly some questions to Dr. Apostle, you can still send them to us to UNODC-ICSANT@un.org. And please also know that the recording of this event will soon be made available at our ICSANT website. So please feel free to rewatch it and share it with your colleagues and friends who couldn't make it today. This webinar series will go on with new events to discover many other aspects of ICSANT. So stay tuned and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you and goodbye.